short webinar for Project Galgo. It explains what happens during the Galgo's first few days here in the UK. You'll see a picture of on the screen of a Galgo that's been recently rescued. The thing about this is, obviously, these dogs are traumatized. They've been starved. They've only ever only had abuse. What I want you to think about is how difficult life must have been when they're going through this, how hungry and tired and how miserable they must have been. But it's the only life experience they've ever had until their rescue. What we're hoping to do by rehoming dogs and giving them new homes in the UK is to improve their lives. So they receive love, care, food, and they start to feel like they can trust again and trust humans in particular. Then, as the journey begins, it must be for them looking a little bit like this, down into a tunnel. They've got no way of knowing whether things are going to get better for them. They don't have that optimism or that feeling that things will become easier or safer. Your life and homes and routines and rhythm that your new foster experiences when they go to your home, does not necessarily mean for them that things are going to improve. They are unlikely to anticipate anything good happening. So it must be the equivalent of staring into this long, dark tunnel. We can be pretty sure from past experiences from the dogs that these things have been included in their lives. So if you have a really good look at this, I'll leave it up for a little while. So their past experiences would have been those of anxiety, lack of sleep, definitely hunger, fear, and general discomfort. The first sight of a new home, rather than being pleasant or exciting, is likely to be full of worry because it's unfamiliar and it's stressful. These things are likely to occur to us because they are normal for us. And so we're unlikely to notice that the dogs are feeling a little bit worried and a bit anxious. So as we look at this slide, you need to kind of take in what may have been a past experience for the dogs. So this is a really good slide because we would never think about all of these things. It's just a door. It's only a door. There's a pavement in front of it. But for a dog that's never been into a particular house and possibly never been into a home, all of these things become worries. They're all scary. For us, they're normal. We filter some of this out. We filter a lot of it out. If we didn't filter some of this out, we'd all go a bit bonkers as well. But even wobbly paving underneath their feet, the wind blowing on the plants, curtains blowing in the wind, the overhanging shelter over the door, dogs barking next door. These are all things that would make them pause and wonder whether they're going to be safe when they step through that door. Like I said, these are normal for us. We don't even consider them. But for a dog that's been through a lot of trauma and anxiety and has got used to living in a certain situation, these things are scary. So if you have a look at this, and I've made it kind of colourful for the reason that things stand out, what do we need to give these dogs to help them to heal. They're actually really, really simple things. They need a place to call home. They need time. They need a lot of sleep. And for most dogs, it would be in the region of 14 to 16 hours a day. So if a dog that comes from abroad comes to stay with you, you may find that's even more than that. And if they're not sleeping, they may well just be resting. They need company, but that doesn't mean they need things going on constantly, people coming and going, and they just need somebody sitting quietly with them. They need meals at least twice a day so that the gradual rhythm of the house begins to filter into their minds and they begin to feel better. A place to heal from physical and mental trauma. So we can easily see any wounds on their bodies, any problems like this particular dog, which was the original slide. You can see whether they're underweight. Those physical things are easy to see. What we can't see is the trauma, the mental trauma. We should have no expectations. We need to be available to the dog. What's not needed, because of the things in purple, sometimes when we include the bright green things, we impact on the purpley things. So we don't need to make them walk for at least 10 days. So it's a little bit controversial to many people because they feel like they've got to get out and about, they've got to begin training, the dog's got to understand how to live their new life. If that's where most people are thinking, or what you're thinking if you get a new dog, you're going too fast. We don't need to do socializing training. We don't need to add things. If anything, we're taking things away. So these are the kind of things, these new experiences, when you do start to include them. So this might be after a period of 10 days, 2 weeks. It will be dependent on the individual dog. So these pictures that I've got up here are just dogs going about their kind of everyday lives. How soon you put these things in will depend on the dog. So new experiences need to be positive. Please let your new dog observe. So you can see in one of the pictures, or a few of the pictures, the dogs are just looking at things. Observing is learning. If you're going to meet other dogs, they should be small, well-conducted social groups with dogs that are very skilled at communication, so they don't run into a new dog's face. Groups are good because they promote learning. You can include simple treat searches, as these fulfill a basic need to scavenge. They're also beneficial for promoting good movement, and movement is life, basically. So we're not talking about rushing around, we're talking about being very thoughtful about how they're moving and where they're putting their feet. And it establishes physical, emotional balance. And all of these are very sensory-based activities. Remember that curiosity, if we allow our dogs to be curious, conquers fear. These things that are illustrated here are all very positive, and learning will occur naturally. So I've included this slide because as you go out and about with your dog, or as you introduce your dog into new situations, you will inevitably come across people. A friend of mine calls them the dog park behaviourists. I have a lot to say about them. You do not need to do what they say. Very few of these people that you meet when you're out bonding with your dog have anything to add to what you already know about your dog. You may still know virtually nothing about your new dog, but you know more than they do. You also know where the dog came from. You will have a degree of a degree of understanding of the trauma they were put through. Um, the people you meet on walks in the park, they've often had dogs for many, many years, but then I've been driving for many, many years. I don't understand how a car works. The best thing you can do is politely listen and just move on, because they often are very insistent. I'm sure we've all met these people. There is no point in doing anything they tell you to do, because they will only ever have probably, only ever have advice that is not applicable to whatever situation you are in with your dog. A lot of people think that as soon as a dog from abroad, or, this is also applicable to dogs that have been rescued from the UK as well, because of this whole social media. People on social media will give you their opinion whether you want it or not. Often the opinion is that you should try and leave a dog as soon as possible, because it will make them toughen up or get used to being on their own, or, there's a million reasons why they would say this. Let's have a look at this. The goal of leaving your dog almost as soon as he or she is with you is it's a really difficult one for the dog. This whole idea of attachment theory is actually quite old. It's quite new to put it into a situation where you have a dog with trauma, and to think about what that dog's experiencing. So allowing a dog with trauma issues to be with you whenever they choose is extremely beneficial and paves the way to restoring sleep patterns. We've already talked about sleep patterns, or we've talked about sleep in a very, very briefly. If a dog can sleep, they become confident in new situations. Sleep is integral for all of us. You cannot be in that place where you don't sleep and have a normal life. You make very bad decisions. You're stressed. Nothing good comes from not being able to sleep, and it affects our confidence. So, by restoring sleep patterns, the dog becomes confident in new situations. This restores physical and emotional balance. Very briefly, the types of attachment it would be it's useful to know about are secure, which means you need to be available to your dog. This boosts confidence. It does not create an over dependency. This is really, really important to understand. Imagine that you were living with somebody and they were trying to leave all the time. You'd wonder what was going on. You'd begin to wonder whether they even liked you. You would find they're being very unpredictable. It's not normal behavior to try and escape out through the door all the time. So this is what the dog begins to get worried about. The person that they want to rely on is trying to disappear all the time. This other situation, avoidant, which includes too much training and demands in the early days. So it can have a detrimental impact on the dog's mental balance. Anxious, so we talked about this, trying to work on leaving your dog alone in the early days will increase anxiety, not decrease it. Please don't be unpredictable. Remember, you are your dog's anchor. So these things, we've already kind of briefly touched on them. So dogs rely on us for all their basic needs. They don't have the ability to choose where they go, what they eat, where they sleep. So it's up to us to not only provide those basic needs, but also look at their communication. We might not like how they're communicating with us, that doesn't mean they're going to develop into an aggressive dog, or they're going to attack you. If their communication could be very barky at the beginning, that doesn't mean they're going to end up as dogs that bark and are vocal all the time. It will just be part of trying to understand their new world. You are the buffer between your dog and any fears. So we need to recognize the fears, provide safety, and provide reassurance. There's no substitute for patience and time. I'm going to say this little expression, your dog is your calendar. It used to be trotted out to me, literally, when I was working with horses a lot, because of the phases of training that the horse would go through. It's just as applicable to the dogs. So what you might find, and people are always in a rush to take their dogs out and about. We've already talked about how important it is for little social groups. If we go too fast and we go out to too many places, it doesn't matter about us. You can go and get yourself a cup of coffee or go to the beach or whatever you want to do. Maybe do it without your dog to begin with, or take your dog in the car and just look out the window and watch the people go past. Because if you do too much, what will happen is there will be freezing on walks. And that doesn't sound too terrible, except to the point where maybe you're going across the road and your dog freezes in the middle of the road and won't move, and you physically have to pick them up and carry them. That is not a good place for a dog to be. We need to back off. Your dog might be excited to go out, look like he's really excited to go out when you get the lead out and you put the equipment on, a harness on, but actually overall reluctant to actually step out the door. That's a red flag. Your dog he might look like he wants to meet dogs or she wants to meet dogs, but barks and lunges as dogs appear or they get too close, especially in areas where they have no option to move away. Your dog might be hyper alert, which is just scanning all the areas around where they walk. Your dog might be panting and pacing when you get home and can't seem to settle. These are all signs that your dog is not coping on walks. So the solution, which many people, even these days, find really difficult, I really don't know why, because it's easier. It's easier to just do what your dog is trying to tell you to do. The solution is to stop walks, include some enrichment sessions. So these can be snuffle boxes. There's lots of really nice things you can do for your dog, which don't involve going to the pet shop and buying plastic toys. Just get yourself a box, fill it with a few treats, an old smelly sock, something you picked up from there could be an old dropped glove as you walk down the street to find your shopping, to get your shopping. There might be some feathers, there might be some old leaves. All of those things can go into a box. They are the best thing they are the best thing to help provide enrichment for your dog. Encourage sleep, spend more time with your dog. In January, I did a dog group, and we did tasks every single week. And one of the tasks was to read to the dog. Reading to your dog, especially when they're new, is brilliant because they get used to your voice. You are sitting with them reading 2 pages, 3 pages for 10 minutes, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter what book you read, but it's a really good way of allowing your dog's stress levels to come down and allowing them to get to know you. When you do go out, let your dog observe from a distance. Don't feel that you need to march up to every single dog you meet. And when you go out, include a few treat searches in quiet areas when you do resume short walks. But the first most important thing to do is to stop walks, go back a few steps, and then reintroduce them really slowly. This is not destructive. It's constructive and will improve trust, confidence, and help to form those secure attachments, which we talked about a few slides ago. So that's the end of this little webinar. And we just felt that we needed something that people could look at and perhaps they could play a few times so that they could process this information, just like the dogs need to process information when they come to us. If you would like to discuss anything we talked about in this webinar, here's my contact details. Thank you for listening.